Hi guys, my name is Zach. I'm a performance coach and I'm here today with one of my clients. Hi Terence, how are you?
I'm well, and yourself?
I'm doing fantastic, thanks. And in this video, we're gonna be having a look at some old footage of myself from being an actor, where I was an actor in South Africa, and then when I moved over to teaching English, where I became a content creator, and to where I am today, a performance coach. So folks, let's jump into it. So anything that comes to your mind, any thoughts that you have, questions about acting, etc.?
Well, I just wanted to know what sparked your interest.
Okay, so let's see. Acting, the thing that sparked my interest for acting was probably when I was about 6 years old. I watched The Lord of the Rings. And I remember going to Mr. Video with my parents, and they would go and rent Lord of the Rings 1 and Lord of the Rings The Twin Towers. And we would go and watch that whole weekend these two Lord of the Rings movies. And one of the cool characters in Lord of the Rings, which made me think about how are they doing what they're doing? It looks so lekker, it looks so nice, was the character Gollum, played by the actor Andy Serkis, which was an animated, skulking creature walking around. And that's one of the things that inspired me to think about, there's acting. This is something that people do for a living. And then fast forward to when I was 7 years old. And in South Africa, we do a lot of competitions for everything. You compete in sport, you compete with languages, you compete with math, but you also compete with art. And one of the things that really pushed me forward was Eisteddfod. Do you know where Eisteddfod comes from?
I do not.
Eisteddfod comes from it's a Welsh arts competition. So in Wales, you go to the Eisteddfod to compete with your singing, your dancing, and your musical instruments that you can play. But in South Africa, of course, you also do acting. Did your children ever do Eisteddfod when they were young?
No, they did not. My sons were more sports orientated, and I think maybe because of a lack of my own experience with regards to acting, I never encouraged it.
Mm-hmm. And what is the perception in South Africa about acting?
I think acting is a foreign concept for a large majority, maybe. Just if I look at my own background, I was hardly ever exposed to acting, and when I look back at my school days, I think maybe a select few learners whose parents had previously been exposed to it, acting and Eisteddfod, would encourage their children to compete and to take part. But no, my experience was little to none.
Yeah, for myself, what I remember being a child from Eisteddfod was the prescribed poetry which you would get, and that you would have this opportunity to go to your drama teacher, who's usually one of the school teachers. She would coach you through that piece of poetry. She would help you memorize the lines, help you know what movements to make, how to enunciate and pronounce certain words. And then she would coach you through this in a rhythmic way in a few weeks' time to prepare you for this big happening where you're going to get on a stage in front of your peers and, of course, their parents and the judicators, and you're going to do this piece of poetry. Now, at that time, I was 7, I remember, and we went to, I think, law school, Birchley Primary. And what I remembered was we did a piece of poetry of the opera singer who is now known as a poet, Philip de Vos, and we did a poem about animal sounds. And I remember very vividly how my teacher, Mrs. Nudia, would coach me through how to roar the way a lion would roar, how to perch my head forward as I'm shrieking like a bird, and all kinds of things like that. And I remember that time when I would get on the stage and I would start doing it exactly like she showed me to. And something there just clicked. It was very enjoyable. It was like time stood still. And for many actors, that's like something special that happens. And that's what inspires them, is that experience of being in front of an audience. So that was like my real first inspiration to say like, hey, I like this. And I'm going to keep on doing this. And one of the things that I'm going to show you guys right now is from when I was 10 years old. It was at the South African Championships of Performing Arts. It's a bit different than Eisteddfod, but it's the same, except that there they focused more on getting kids to do a monologue. Now, a monologue is very interesting because it is a single person having a conversation with somebody else, meaning they are speaking to another person, an extended dialogue, but only them, hence monologue. And I've actually got the DVD over here, so we're going to have a look at that and we'll talk a bit about it.
Right.
Yesterday, one old Freckles got hit by a car. Me and Freckles were outside playing stick fight. Do you not play that? We play it all the time. I throw the stick and he gets it and brings it back. But before he does, Freckles runs around and makes me dash. And when I do, I have to pull the stick out of his mouth.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that I remembered vividly with this experience was we would take a long drive to Rustenburg Civic Center because this is where they would host this competition. And the second thing that I remembered was it was a very dingy, moldy space where we would wait backstage because they wouldn't switch on the air conditioning, and it's Rustenburg, so it's kind of hot. And then the third thing is that stupid stage of theirs, because it's a makeshift stage in like a dance room or something in a hall, but it wasn't such a good stage to do a performance on, because you don't hear gong, 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 you would always hear your feet. So what I remember was our acting teacher, Eti Kritzinger, would try and coach us to try and walk as quiet as possible, to walk like a mouse when we're doing our big movements. But obviously, as you can see for 10-year-old Francois over there, that's kind of difficult with those big shoes that he has on.
Don't worry. He didn't die. He just had to go to the hospital to get a cast his broken leg. He's inside now, lying down, resting. I guess it'll be a while before we can play stick fight again.
Yeah, so what do you think about that? 10-year-old Zach doing a performance.
Well, Zach, I was wondering, how did participating in the competitions actually change your approach towards acting?
Well, obviously over there, I was 10 years old, so what I understood back in the day was, here's a text, there's a story, do exactly what the drama teacher wants you to do, and then from there, if you're good at it, then maybe you'll get a medal or a certificate. So it wasn't, at that time in my life, I always viewed it obviously as a competition, as we always do in the beginning of something. It's only afterwards, by doing this over and over again, where something would pique my interest to say like, oh, I want to try and do something more professional with this. I want to know how Americans do this. I'll show you quickly another piece that connects well into why I'm saying like, well, this is how Americans do this. So here you can see, this is obviously I'm wearing baseball clothing. Most of the pieces that were selected for these competitions were from American movies. Okay. And this was the 2000s. And as you know, in South Africa in the 2000s, what were we experiencing? Charlize Theron, Oscar nomination, Monster, Arnold Vosloo, The Mummy. We were in this euphoria of this idea of Hollywood. So for a child at the age of 10, they would imagine to say like, oh, they want to be an actor in Hollywood. And that was very popular in South Africa at the time. It's probably still the same thing right now, but back then, this was 2006. Charlize got her Oscar in 2004. Everybody was marketing something to say like, we will take you to Hollywood. It was very prominent. So that definitely pushed me towards what I would like look into as a child. Yeah, so that's basically what I did as a school kid. I always looked forward to these competitions. That's what I would participate in. But what it led me to eventually was in high school, I developed this idea of saying like, hey, I want to do what professional actors do. I want to know what it is that how I can do what they're doing. And what I remember was my dad spoke to one of the teachers whose son studied at an acting studio. A woman who had a studio where she would teach teenagers about acting from what she had learned when she herself was studying at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and also UCLA. So there was an opportunity for me in high school to start a foundation of professional acting training. And that is where I started my journey with the Playhouse. And then after the Playhouse, I had a very good understanding of what does it mean to be an actor, to, as they would say, live truthfully under the imaginary circumstances. That's where you would learn about Sanford Meisner and Stella Adler, Uda Hagen, the famous Lee Strasberg, the method acting teacher who taught Al Pacino and Robert De Niro and other actors. So there was a big foundation of American acting methodology from there. And that kind of pushed me to the next part of my journey, which was wanting to get an agent and audition. And that's actually what we're going to have a look at right now, is one of the films that I successfully auditioned for and that I performed in, a South African spy kids genre film called Agent 2000. I also, via going to the auditions, the casting director, who was at the time also the acting coach of this film, Lilia Etzebeth, also ran an acting on screen course. Same thing of how do you perform in front of a camera. Now, Terence, you must keep in mind, all of this was pretty new to South Africa. Smartphones that time wasn't like it was today. It was pretty basic. So the opportunity for somebody to learn about acting and then having to learn acting and how to do it in front of a camera, like the South African actors do it. And Lelia, I think she worked on Bakgat and Liefling and those very big Afrikaner movies in the late 2000s. That's what she starred in. That was an awesome opportunity to learn more about how to perform on camera. Here you can see on this menu a lot of stuff that I did when I was 17 years old. So we just watched from when I was 10 and now we're watching something of when I was 17. And here you can see a kid with a foundation and understanding of what it means to be an actor, and a kid who goes regularly to auditions, and this is basically what you get. Here's a very cool scene over here. You might recognize this guy. So that is Ruan Wessels, the Binnenlander child actor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So jy was die waarheid gesê het. Jy's nie ek. Dit is nie punt nie. Jy wil gaan uitvind en dan sê jy dit word moeilikheid. Hoe sê my dit is iets? Jy ons gaan hier middag hier so sit. Saai dat jy sê iets of ek. Ek kan nie. My pa gaan my doodmaak. Wat jy van vir ons sê, man? Dit is die child. Ja, maar dit was 'n joke. Ja. Van nie hier. Sorry, dit is 'n joke. Ek kan nie gedink nie, maar dit dit is so presies, jy het nie gedink nie. Net so, dit is hele klas hier so, detensie. So, maak jy mond oop. Okay. Sê jy mond aan? Ja? Dan sal ek jy saam met Justin die woord vat. Serieus? Wat? Dude, Justin Bieber sak. Wat is fout met jou? Wat the hell's fout met jou, juffrou?
You know, it's really cool if you watch that and you notice the difference between somebody who's learned a lot about acting and somebody who's a child actor. So you notice that at that age, being 17 years old, I'd always be in my head, because that's one of the things that you learn as an actor, to try and think as the actor thinks, to try and have organic thoughts. While somebody who hasn't had a lot of formal education in that, in the American acting exercises, they had this natural way of just keeping their face up and then just being able to listen and take in the other person, whilst the other person is like, oh, thinking over here with the head down and stuff, which is a very normal thing. That's something very cool to notice, between the difference between an educated child actor and a child actor who learned from scratch while being on a film set. And he's a very good actor, I must say. I enjoyed that scene. Yeah, so all of this accumulated eventually to me having to try out an actual South African film, which is, of course, like it's like coming a full circle. A teenager who's about to graduate high school, acting as if he is playing a character who's going to graduate high school on a film set, whilst everybody's teaching him like an adult, but he's wearing school clothes from a different school, and the school teachers are walking around being like, hey, why aren't you in school? Why aren't you in class? And you walk around and be like, well, I'm an actor. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, man. Which university are you studying at? Turkey's. And it was this weird experience when I was filming this. Do you have any questions?
Not at this stage. I'm still really fascinated. It's quite interesting.
What is interesting about this?
Well, watching that clip, I could basically pick up two different acting styles, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was at a very early stage of your acting career, but I could see a distinct difference in the acting there.
Yeah, and it becomes a bit more differentiated, and it kind of inspired me to look more into film acting. Just wait for that. It inspired me a bit more to look into film acting, and that's where I went on this whole journey of trying to go to America and study more acting, because obviously, hey, grew up doing like Eisteddfods and SA Champs whilst Charlize Theron had gotten her Oscar. So, and then going into film acting and being like, yes, I can do everything in the Afrikaans film industry, but I'd like to learn more, which is very normal. And some people believe that in order for you to get more jobs, you need to go and study more acting, which is true. It is true. You need a foundation for any career to learn more, acquire more knowledge and skills and experience to be better at it. And other people were of the opinion that it's not about what you know, but about who you know, which is also very true. So if you were lucky enough to have an opportunity to practice whilst doing the work with professional actors on sets, like for example Ruan, who was very lucky to have that opportunity, you build a lot of connections and people get to know you, so then you're very credible and very visible, and that's also a correct way of doing it. There's no incorrect way of doing this work. Either or, you can either go and study to become an actor and then jump into it, and or you can go and experience it whilst being in that scenario. Child actors just have more, they just have an openness to it because they're children. And once you teach them to say, like, keep your head up, kind of just think about it, the imagination's already there and they don't have all that high school BS. And you can see over there Zach, at the age of 17, had experienced some teenage angst in school, as opposed to the 10-year-old version of myself.
Yes.
Yeah, which is completely normal.
Slakker! Sy saam vir connectedness! Stilte! Die leerlingraad gaan onsself aan julle voorstel.
In this scene, the protagonist is trying to find out who's the antagonist, the guy who's terrorizing the school children. Obviously, my character wasn't that. It gets revealed in this, but it's one of those embarrassing things which I cringe to watching it back, having to have done this in this film. I remember on the day that we were going to film that, they're like, hey, you have to A, work out the dance moves on your own, and 2, the costume shop only had this in stock. We're not sure who this is for, but you're going to have to wear it. And it looked like some kind of a spandex stripper leotard thing from the 80s. And you can see like at the top of the head, there's like a hole where you put through the ponytail and stuff. And it's like, oh, I'm supposed to wear that. And it's got like that dangling string. So yeah, that was quite... it was a lot of fun to work out, but I felt so dirty after that.
That's very entertaining.
Yeah, at least they knew how to, like, with insert shots, just to propel the story forward, to make cool little bits with comedic timing. You got this one scenario of this character following this supposed bad guy, and he gets rejected by the girl with the lollipop, so there's some innuendo there. And then the second one's like, oh, there's the kid with the black hair, the spiky black hair, and clearly he's getting something like something dangerous in the box, and then he disappears, and it's a bit of suspense, like, but why did he disappear? And then, oh, there's that other kid, the real mean one, and it's like, oh no, he's dancing, he's in the dance school. That no, so I had a lot of fun doing this type of stuff, and this inspired and propelled me into the direction of wanting to study more acting, more film acting, because I really would wanted to do more of that. There was a lot more to learn. You cannot go wrong with learning more. And from there, I went and applied for several acting schools, didn't get in any of them. I wanted to go to New York, didn't work out. And the place that I got accepted into was a place called Vancouver Film School, which is where the South African director and filmmaker Neil Blomkamp studied. So that was at that time, Chappie, the movie Chappie was pretty big, and Elysium, the two movies that came after the blockbuster phenomena, District 9. And obviously I was a bit inspired to say, like, I should go study where this guy is studying. And they had an accelerated conservatory program where I can study conservatory style acting. Now, conservatory style means, what I mean by it is, you are at class 9 in the morning and you finish anywhere between 4 in the afternoon or 8 in the evening, and you're just busy doing acting training. So you work on your whole instrument, your voice, your speech, your movement, you do Shakespeare, you do accent work, you do camera classes, scene work classes, you do everything that was done in the past. For example, at Playhouse and the acting on string course, but at a much more professional level with working professionals. All of the acting teachers were all working in the Vancouver film industry, and they would be in sci-fi stories like Stargate, or they would be in Fringe, or they would be in CW shows, that's superhero TV shows. Most of them had worked in there. So it was a real cool experience to learn from working professionals in the, what you call the North Hollywood film industry. Because that's where everybody goes for their tax rebates. They would go and film there because the crews were cheaper and they would get tax rebates from the government to incentivize them to film there instead of in the US.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's why if you go to Toronto, you can do shows that are based in New York. And if you go to Vancouver, it's like anything from LA to Seattle, Woodlands, fantasy, sci-fi, that's all filmed in Vancouver.
How old were you at the time?
At that time when I went to Canada, I turned 20.
Sure.
Yeah, so it was quite the adventure. So I didn't stop. I started studying acting actively when I was 14. And by the time I was 20 years old, I was studying more acting in depth at a conservatory level in Canada. Yeah, so that is, what is that, 6-7 years of continuous practicing of a craft. It's a very long time. It's like going to university, because you also take a very long time to acquire these skills and not experience, but theoretical skills necessary to have certain qualifications.
Yeah.
Not that I'm saying that what I did is equivalent to like having a master's, but it's a lot of time that was invested from my teenage years up until I was in my early 20s. And right now we will have a look at some of the stuff. So now you'll see another difference over here. You'll notice that there's a completely different type of style. For example, this is a headshot. This is what you use to advertise yourself to agents and casting directors for the type of characters that you can play. And Vancouver had a very specific style of headshots, and you would have the opportunity to choose between you don't choose. The acting teacher would choose for you between three photographers who would do the headshots. So that was all included in the package. And then you would have an opportunity to use that as your headshots. And then on top of that, you would have a performance reel, and all the material that you filmed at your time at VFS, you can gather from your other friends who studied there, and you can cut yourself a demo reel, which is what you use to audition. So that plus a voiceover reel, and you really did everything that was necessary for you to get into the film industry, because that's why you would go there. You go to Vancouver Film School to get ready to enter the industry. You've got a strong foundation, or like an accelerated foundation, and we give you everything, and poof, now you're on your own. But you can do like courses, and maybe you can become a instructor at VFS afterwards, or work at VFS. So, for Canadians and the people who had the opportunity to get the right visas to stay in Canada, it really opened up a good door for them to stay in Vancouver. I wasn't that lucky. I wasn't able to afford to continue staying there further, because Vancouver is, believe it or not, as expensive as New York. It's a very expensive place. But who I was at the age of I'm just going to close the door there. Who I was at the age of 17, and my level and expertise as an actor is much different than the level of expertise and experience of that of when I was 20 years old. And you can see that. You'll notice that there's a more upwards, more open way of playing towards the camera. There's a lot more range. There's a lot more moments that you can really identify to say like, oh, he's acting. As opposed to he's just running on a lunky stage like a 10-year-old, like, and then it's like, it becomes a thing of like, and after VFS is like, you can notice that there's a difference. This is a performance reel.
Hey, stop. Stop.
Fuck is it now? You keep resolving the chord.
I want you to land hard on the one.
Ride the 4 chord for 2 more measures.
Just trust me.
It's gonna feel like blue balls.
Listen, either we're playing the song or not.
You wanna make up your own progressions?
Hey, why don't you guys just take 5?
I'm sorry, are you leading the band now?
What are you doing?
He's a fucking prima donna, that's what.
Is he? You've been acting like a little bitch for days with your passive-aggressive bullshit.
Oh yeah? Why don't you and Alex get together and figure out my shit for me then?
Well, finally, we're getting somewhere at least.
What the fuck is that supposed to mean?
You're jealous. The night the 3 of us had.
Listen, we're opening for the Dolls in 24 fucking hours. I don't give a shit about which bandmate's cock you suck. Let's start again.
So you notice how much completely different that is compared to like a 17-year-old Zach.
Yeah, it's definitely way more grown up.
Yeah, way more. Even the language use is just more visceral.
Yeah.
That's why you go and you study abroad and you go to an acting program like this, is to broaden what you can do, and it becomes a way more mature. It even changes the way that you, for example, would perform in Afrikaans as well. I'll show you something where I did an English version and an Afrikaans version, and then you'll be quite surprised as to how much different it feels. It's not so dark. It's not so dark and moody. It's just different.
Tom, what's going on? You just leave? You don't talk anymore? You don't support what we're doing over there? What's going on?
Come on, Ron.
Come on, what? I say something you don't like, you tell me. Spit it out, Tom.
I just don't...
You don't what?
Well, I just don't think it's right. For you to say it's a bunch of shit, I don't think it's right.
What do you mean it's not right? What are you saying, Tom?
I think they're trying to say that they don't want more people to come back like you.
Yeah, that's easy for them to say. Yeah, that's great for them to say. But you know what? Where were they when our country needed them? Where were they? Love it or leave it, Tom. Love it or leave it.
Okay, Afrikaans.
Tinus? Wat gaan aan? Jy praat nie meer nie, jy loop net uit. Jy stem nie saam met wat ons doen op die grens nie. Wat gaan aan, Tinus?
Ag, kom nou Rebart.
Ag, kom nou wat? Wat sê ek wat jy nie van hou nie? Sê vir my. Jy ondersteun die optogte?
Ek kan nie.
Jy kan nie wat nie.
Ek kan nie bystaan en luister terwyl jy sê oor die optogte 'n klomp gemors is nie. Dis nie reg nie.
Wat bedoel jy? Wat sê jy nou eintlik? Wil jy ons met ons vlag afbrand? Wil jy ons met ons land afbreek? Of jy staan saam met ons of jy is 'n kommunis, Tinus? Jy staan saam met ons of jy is 'n kommunis?
Ek dink hulle
Jy dink wat van hulle?
Ek dink hulle wil net conskripsie verban. Omdat hulle nie wil hê mense se terugkom soos jy nie.
O ja, dit is baie maklik van hulle om te sê. Dit is so maklik vir hulle om te sê. Maar waar die fok was hulle toe ons hulle nodig gehad het op die grens? Waar was hulle? Jy is of saam met of jy is teen ons.
So what led you to consider teaching acting after VFS?
Okay, so the thing that really inspired the idea of, hey, I like this acting thing, maybe I should transition over to what these teachers are doing, was this 1 week intensive with one of the acting teachers called Bill Marchant. And he did this 1 week called Impulse Week. It's this beautiful, intense week where, based on your strengths and your weaknesses as an actor, you would get assigned a scene partner, and you'll be given a scene from one of the plays that they always recycle, and that they always do it in Paul's week, because he's also a writer, so he understands how using one scene over and over again, you get to know the scene better, and you get to unlock new things, and every scene is supposed to awaken a new aspect for an actor. It's like this: if you do a scene, change must happen. You're offering something of yourself out there, and this scene will change you for good or for worse, supposedly for better. But this is what it means to be an actor. It's a real true honor to be experiencing transformation with a scene. So all of us at VFS would get a scene partner, somebody that we probably never did anything with, and we have to rehearse it in advance. And then in that week, piece by piece, we go through every impulse of that scene, and Bill nitpicks at us and he rips us apart to put us back together. And he helps us find the impulse and that a beautiful moment-to-moment breathing in the moment experience. Acting for me became, the definition became from living truthfully under the imaginary circumstances, to breathing truthfully under the imaginary circumstances, because breath is the only thing that you can control. Everything else must be impulse. Everything must come organically, because everything happens organically in real life. So that's part of the craft of acting. That's the only thing that you can train as an actor to control, is how you breathe. But everything else you have worked through and practiced so that it can happen. It can happen in the imaginary circumstance. And that week of intense perturbation, if you will, of seeing how people are transformed and how we're able to achieve new stages of storytelling, that inspired me to say I would love to be able to teach acting. In fact, one day I will teach my first acting class. It took like 2 years before I got there, but eventually I got there. So after Vancouver Film School, I went back to South Africa, and I hit kind of like a slump, if you will, frustration, because I didn't want to, with what I experienced, the great successes, the great enlightenment that I had experienced, just take 10 steps down and go down to the first floor again, whilst I felt like I was at the 5th floor of development and experience. So, of course, what was good at that time was I got a new agent, I knew the dance, I knew what it meant to build a relationship with the casting directors, what roles there were, and maybe how I should develop the craft and my career. But I wasn't happy doing it. I wasn't. I yearned for something deeper, something that I had experienced over there at Vancouver Film School. And at that time, I started looking into going to Russia, because from what I understood, and from what I still know, is that that's the foundation, that's the starting point of this idea of acting being a craft and a profession. And that's why I wanted to go over there, because clearly those people knew something a bit more about performing arts, because it comes from there.
Do you think that these South Africans did not appreciate the energy that you brought back from Vancouver? Do you think they were or are at the same level?
That's a very good question. It's not that they don't appreciate it, it's just what you do with it. What I've only realized last year is that energy that you acquired is for specific genres of storytelling within acting, specific styles. And mind you, everything that I studied at Vancouver Film School, most of it is only now, 10 years later, again available in South Africa. Because most of the South Africans who had studied American naturalism in the US in the 1990s and 2000s, a lot of them came back to South Africa, and some of them tried opening up their own studios and their own workshops. Some successful, some not so successful. And some people opened up their own movement schools, improv schools, also something that you would find in any standard curriculum for studying acting at a conservatory level. Whether you study Lee Strasberg stuff or Meissner stuff, or if you study in the English, what the English would study, they study Chekhov and lots of Shakespeare and stuff that I don't even know. And they also do lots of French-based acting stuff, which comes from Commedia dell'arte, clowning and improv and lots of cool stuff. That's only now available. But back then, there was no genre where you can put that into play. They weren't auditioning that much in Cape Town even, films and whatnot. But now in Cape Town, I am pretty sure that the demand is there for that level of acting training and performance, because what was filmed in Vancouver is now being filmed in Cape Town, again for more tax rebates and cheaper productions. But at that time, unfortunately, my agent would send me out to Sievendelaan, and what I was doing and what Sievendelaan acting is, because it's soap opera acting, is not what I want, the type of acting that I wanted to do. I liked film acting. I didn't like Sievendelaan acting. Sievendelaan acting wasn't so fun. And commercials are commercials. It's not that they didn't appreciate it. It's just, what do you do with it? If the stories that are being told are not requiring that type of storytelling. And that's only a thing that I realized last year. But yeah, probably at the time, I definitely thought that they were stupid. I was definitely frustrated with them. There's a difference between a 17-year-old me being like, ooh, this is amazing, Afrikaans films, wonderful. I'm getting in front of a camera, as opposed to 21-year-old me being like, oh, I've been in front of a camera and I know what's necessary for a good scene, but I don't feel fulfilled with this. And I feel like I'm giving so much and I'm receiving so little. And I know that I'm not going to build a career from this. But this is before my understanding of building visibility and being credible in a community. But you only realize that stuff 10 years after you've gone on that crazy journey, which is fine. A university student will only appreciate the time that they spent working on their bachelor's and their master's and their doctor's only after the fact. As with most professions, you need a bit of distance from that experience afterwards in order to appreciate it. So yeah, that's what my mind is at right now when you ask me that. But an interesting experience. I did go and teach English then in Russia. It took me time to get work there, and I wasn't teaching acting, although I was interacting with a lot of actors. I was teaching one couple, a family of actors, their son English. And then I was also just, experiencing the culture of Russia. Russian culture is very rich in art. It's a beautiful place. Anybody can play a musical instrument and play a chord that is music to the soul, and you can feel the tears building up, and you can feel that passion. It's a very soulful place to be in Russia. And I remember getting kicked out of the apartment that I was living in. There was no more students for me, and the place that I was working for was like, well, that's it, you need to leave tomorrow. And I was homeless, so I contacted a friend of mine, and I said like, hey, could you speak to your landlord? Maybe there's a room I could rent. And he was like, yeah, there's a walk-in closet with an old couch. You can get it for 6,000 rubles. That's like $100. And I was like, done. And then I would stay my last month in St. Petersburg I took out the couch because it was very moldy and dingy and disgusting. So I slept on the floor. But yeah, I stayed in a walk-in closet. And in my drunken stupor with my friends, I murmured to them one evening that, you know what? I have a strong desire to teach acting. And then they were like, really? You, a South African? What can you teach Russians about acting? And I told them, well, you contact any theater that you want. If they say yes, I will teach over there. And so the next morning, when I was recovering, my friends had called up a theater. And the theater was like, yes, we want to see this South African who wants to do a masterclass about American film acting. So that's what happened. Was at the end of that month, 2 days before I flew back to South Africa, I did my first ever acting masterclass, my first ever experience really teaching. And that predicament put me on a journey of aspiring and trying to go into acting-based teachings for up until now. Actually, I've got photos over here. Look at this. So that was the masterclass at Obraz Theater. It's my friend Ilya. Everybody wore black, as you do in the theater. And there's hungry Zach. Very hungry, very skinny, but was I very happy to be there. And only one person, the guy over there, Konstantin, was actually an actor. Everybody else was there just to experience it. They were all English students or English teachers. But it was a fun opportunity just to try some exercises and get them to read English lines from American Beauty. Because American Beauty is with Kevin Spacey. The one where you see the girl with the rose petals as he's daydreaming. Yeah, that one. It's a very good film acting movie. We studied at a Vancouver Film School, watched it in scene study class, film studies. So you would sit in the auditorium with the screen on, and somebody would do a presentation on it, and then you would watch the movie, and then afterwards you would have a debate and discussion about the film. In South Africa, I wasn't able to emulate that because nobody wanted to talk deeply about films. It was really frustrating, but time and timing. I think right now there might be people who would appreciate that, but back then, who the hell wants to watch with 20-year-old Zach some American movie and talk about film technique and color and lighting and themes and stuff? But in any case, I used that script, I printed it out for them all. I was sleeping on a yoga mat. I was eating apples and rice and bananas. And then I discovered beer that I could buy very cheaply. And then I started living off of that as well. But it was so fun. And this really just opened it up into wanting to teach more. 3 months later, I was in Yekaterinburg. I actually got a proper job contract. I wasn't in St. Petersburg anymore. I was in Yekaterinburg, and there I was just teaching 6 days a week, corporate kindergarten, preparing students for tests, doing odd contract work here and there where my company would rent me out to other companies. I would do workshops. I would do English arts competitions. I would just be teaching. And this just took me on this whole trajectory of acquiring teaching experience while teaching English as a foreign language. But yeah, from there I started teaching more, teaching. I didn't get an opportunity to do more acting stuff but I had lots of opportunities to use the skills that I had as an actor and all that experience to help Russians, whether they needed to gain confidence to do an interview in English to try and get a job in the UK, or they needed to prepare for their speaking examination and they had a speech impediment, which was a physical disability that I knew these are the exercises that you can try and do to help loosen your jaw, which I learned in voice and speech classes to help them be able to more comfortably speak. And I would just use a lot of the things that I learned to try and help people be a bit more confident and open. So that was like my journey there. And then eventually the contract ended and I had to go back to South Africa, and I took my girlfriend with me. And then going from acting to going to more teaching there, I started delving more into having to create my own content and having to find my own students. In the past 2 days, we looked at stories with themes of the pursuit of dreams, Hollywood versus Broadway. And before we move on to explore the English in these movies, let's look at one more story. Marriage Story is a 2019 drama film. So this is my one of my courses that I started doing. Again, like where I would use the English niche and use my actor-based skills to help people with speaking English. I called this the English Through Acting Marathon. Did it here in South Africa during COVID. We would help Russian students get interested into exploring using films and stories for them to improve their English, because it's all about input. And there I would explain some movies, get them to watch it, and then I prescribe them a monologue from one of those films. And with that information, they've got enough background to start putting it into use and start using it to start speaking the words, almost like when I was a young child doing those Eisteddfod pieces, those poetry stuff and those monologues at the SA Champs. Same principle, although with the purpose of helping a person acquiring new language, a new source of language input for them to improve their English. And this series was, I think, like 18 lessons. It was a marathon, and you take 2 weeks and you go through this, and then you would go and from there do private lessons with me where I would go with you through the monologue. Very much a good precursor to the stuff that I started doing this year with stage speech and actor-based performance coaching. Although I did it here for helping English students. But just one of the examples where I would create lots of content. If you were to go on your phone, you would also see that what I also did is I would use actor stuff to get a script in Russian to do something in Russian for students so that they can learn English, but I would speak in Russian to them. But I didn't know Russian at the time. So it's also something interesting, but I'm not going to show that right now because but yeah, that's some of the stuff that I did. And then over here, I would basically, contextualize, summarize the whole story that they would have to watch. If you have a summary of a movie and you watch the movie and you know what the movie's about, it's easier to watch. If I were to watch a Russian movie, if I didn't know what it's about and I didn't have a summary of it, it'd be very difficult for me to follow what's going on. But if I knew this is the plot lines and this is the protagonist and this is the antagonist, it's easier to take in and to go through that process of watching something in a foreign language. But also, if you remember from when I helped you with your public speaking, if you take any piece of text and you don't know the story behind it, it feels very archaic. But if you have a big backstory, a beginning and a middle and an end, this is all actor stuff, then you know what you're aiming for. And if you know what you're aiming for, you know where to tackle it, where to emphasize the words, what your objectives are, and you're able to put it into your body easier and make it a part of yourself and perform it. And that's one of the things that I try to do with English through acting, is try and getting those stories, which was actually very relatable, because the same stories that you get in the US you can get in Russia, just by summarizing it, and people would be able to relate to it. So when they would pick up that monologue with lots of new grammar and lots of new sentence structures and vocabulary and pronunciations that they found difficult, at least they knew the background behind it, and it would make them even more inspired to try and memorize this text. Yeah, so that was kind of like the goal with that. Now, eventually, my experience came to an end. Unfortunately, the market for doing business with Russians in Russia ended the moment that the sanctions hit the Russian Federation when Ukraine happened, and that kind of like cut off any means for me to try and do business in Russia. So I had to move into books. So I had to sell books for about 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. As you know, my grandfather had passed away, and he had about 400,000 books that I had to work through and sort and sell to book dealers and book collectors in order to clear out his house. And that's there where I came across early Afrikaans poetry and stuff. Now the cool thing is, if I hadn't had the experience of teaching English as a foreign language and living in a foreign country where Russian is the first language and English isn't the first language, I wouldn't have had the know-how of how to take something archaic like very early Afrikaans, which is mostly Hollands vocabulary, which is 1700s Dutch, and I wouldn't have been able to take it and try and dramatize it. Yeah, and I'm going to show you right now here. What is it? You'll remember this.
Ek wil by jou weer of magistraat jou sou gestraf het, wrentig wat oor de stolen brandewyn. Het hy jou rarig in servitude geplaas vir stolen brandewyn? Nou, ek sê hom, dat hy wil nie luister. Sir, geen slag of stoot het ek van de magistraat gekry nie. Anders dat ek tronk gesit het, das al. Maar die gitaarman, want hy weet mos beter, hy zeg vir my. Maar jy het mos die brandewyn gestolen, niet waar? Ek had nie die brandewyn gestolen. Wie het gesê ek had die brandewyn gestolen? Hoe kan jy iets stolen as jy nie kan vashou nie? Nee, ek het nie die brandewyn nie gestolen nie. Ek sal vir sir nou sê, hoe dit rarig met magistraatse brand...
Vroeg Gesproke Afrikaansch, you know it as much as I do. It is where I dramatize early Afrikaans poetry, plays and stories. I adapt some of it, and with some of it I try and find a direct way of how I imagine they might have sounded like, sometimes phonetically, and with the other pieces I like to adapt it into my own stories. If I hadn't that experience in Russia, and if I hadn't gone back to South Africa, I would have never gotten to a place of doing VGA, which is fantastic. And from there, I kind of went on the trajectory of being what you call an actorpreneur, using the skills of an actor to write advertisements, write your own show, try and organize your own events, promote something. It's like an entrepreneur who uses his actor skills to sell something, whether it's a story or an event or an advertisement, a product. Yeah, that's pretty much where I went into.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any questions about that?
Well, I experienced quite a bit of it with regards to the Vroeg Gesproke Afrikaansch. I could see how you could take a piece of literature, ancient literature, and turn it into an advertisement for a company. And the humor and the creativity, I was really impressed by it. And I must say the interaction that we had during one of those performances with the audience was quite amazing, you know, and I absolutely saw how successfully you can implement it, you know, and going back a bit to you referencing some of the South African soapies and how restricted you are basically with regards to the script and what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. I can see that your strengths are definitely in the creative aspect, where you can take something that is basically lifeless and make a story out of it and give it life, you know, add humor, character, and then interact with the audience. And the feedback from the audience, I must say, it was a very good experience for me.
Hey, ek 'n performer. Ek maak baie content. Ek 'n dag maak my besigheid. Ek hoor klop my deur. Ek opmaak, ek sien 'n man. Ek vra, wat wil hy? Hy sê vir my, ek nie Bali, ek 'n JC. Alle content wat jy create is IP. Alle IP wat jy create, jy moet protect. Oud naam van jou besigheid. Ek vra, protect met wat? Wie kan zulke legal goed verstaan? Hy sê vir my, Stein IP verstaan. Hulle is the experts in trademark, copyright, patents, design en intellectual property. Ek wil nie van jy praat, ek luister. Ek sou maar bel JC en protect my IP. Stein IP. Create, protect.
Yeah, it's fun to be able to take a story and find a voice in an archaic form of a language, which is, as you say, ancient by Afrikaans standards.
Yes, absolutely.
Because Afrikaans is a very young language.
I agree with you.
Yeah, no, it's. I think Vroeg Gesproke Afrikaansch laid a good foundation to exploring my entrepreneurial side. And I was able to utilize that which I learned whilst creating content for my Russian students to help them learn English. Able to use some of that production skills with Vroeg Gesproke Afrikaansch, make some episodes, explain to people, the context, the summary of the story behind it, in order for them to, with that context, be able to listen and try and understand. It's the same principle with English through acting. Creating a summary of a movie is the same as creating a summary of a story of something archaic, because the principle is still, it's like learning a foreign language. Vroeg Gesproke Afrikaans follows the same principle of a foreign language learning. You create the context, you give the simplified explanations of the vocabulary, and with story, you're able to with story, you're able to communicate the message over. Without the story, without knowing what the story is, there's nothing entertaining about it.
Yes.
And if you have that context, if you have that magical sprinkle of imagination, then you breathe the story to life. That's something that's always fun, and I'm definitely going to be working more on it. It just takes damn time. It's a long process to tell a story like that. Last year, I had opportunity to go back to Russia, and there something different happened for me. I was kind of inspired by by Russian theater again. When I was first in Russia, I did a lot of teaching. I taught the Masterclass, but I never interacted further with it. But when I went back to Russia, I had this idea of I want to film a documentary just to show people what life is like in contemporary Russian theater. Because the last time we interacted with that idea of what theater is like in Russia was 100 years ago with Konstantin Stanislavski and the implementation of the Moscow Art Theater touring the US, and those ideas from the Moscow Art Theater taking hold in the US and creating the foundation of modern day acting as we know it. But for myself, I always found it interesting. So when I was back, I decided that I would like to film. I like to film a documentary. It's not finished yet. Again, it takes time. I just need to find the time to continue working on it. But let's have a look at that.
In a world filled with art, literature, and history, join us as we go behind the curtain, watch plays, and uncover the mystery of the Russian theater. Join Zach as he travels to Russia, meets actors and directors to learn more about an actor's life in Russia.
Do you think people take you seriously? Because when it comes to actor training, one would expect a much older person. Do you think with your vast array of knowledge and experience, people take you seriously?
It depends who, right? For example, if you, as an entrepreneur, like that one pitch meeting that you know of well, where I had to pitch a VGO ad to a beverage company, because the person, it wasn't in their interest at all. They didn't want to listen.
I understand.
Of course, it doesn't. It's irrelevant to them. It doesn't matter. It's the same when a few weeks ago there was a job opening at a university where a friend of mine studied screenwriting for a lecturer position, and I might have all that experience, but to them, it's more so about like, do you have the qualifications? And there's two opposing viewpoints in South Africa. The one viewpoint is have this vast well of knowledge to your disposal and this international experience, and then the old model is have the certificate, the correct certificate. Yes, there's a debate in my soul when it comes to that idea. It's a very good question. Let's get back to that again. What was the question?
Do people take you seriously?
Yes and no. It all depends on the worldview that they have and which box they come from. There are people who usually live inside of a box and people who live outside of the box. Is it right or wrong to live in a box? Depends on who you ask. I don't think academically studying and acquiring knowledge to have some sort of certificate from a institution, a pedagogy institution. I don't think necessarily that's a source of authority, but we need people like that. But like I said, if I were to go and apply for a position like that, I won't get it because I don't have the papers that they require. Although I believe that life experience equals also a right to do something. But if I were embittered by that fact, I would be firmly believing still in George Bernard Shaw's quote, "Those who can do it, those who can't teach."
Exactly.
But I love teaching and I love sharing that knowledge. That doesn't mean that I don't have anything to share. There's a lot of things that you can learn from those people who don't take you seriously based on the world that they come from, the academia world. They can teach me a lot about critically analyzing a piece of text. With Vroeg Gesproke Afrikaansch, I was for a while corresponding back and forth with PhD Afrikaans linguistic professors, just to make sure, am I on the right track? We do need them. But will those people take Vroeg Gesproke Afrikaansch seriously from their academic standpoint of view? No. But when you look at that, or you look at the Russian contemporary theater documentary done by an amateur, an actor who's an amateur filmmaker, it is not for the highly intellectualized book nerd. And there's nothing wrong with them. It is for the person who's interested in it. And there is a lot of value for those people. But I will be taken seriously by people who are open for that information, who wants to receive it, who wants to know about it. Vroeg Gesproke Afrikaansch example can only be taken seriously by people who find joy in it and entertainment in it. I don't think it will be accepted by the Suid-Afrikaanse Wetenskap van Akademie en Kuns or the Afrikaanse Taalraad. I don't think so. The Voortrekker Monument, they would enjoy it because it just entertains people enough so to be interested in what they represent, which is the Great Track. And for people who want to, for example, attract people to the Van Riebeeck Museum or the Groot Kasteel, Vroeg Gesproke Afrikaansch could be well enough, interesting enough for them, tangible enough for them to attract curious people. Those are the people that will take me seriously. The people who do not take me seriously, that's fine. That's fine. And it's about, again, time and timing. If you're able to make something with it that proves a concept, then you've proven it to work. Then everybody will care because you've already proved that it's worth somebody's time. Up until then, you're still fighting to make it worthwhile somebody else's time. To make it somebody else's time worth, I'm mixing it up. To make it worth somebody else's time to review and look at. So, it's like, I don't call myself an acting coach, and I don't want to call myself a public speaking coach either, because I understand there are definitely people who are more skilled than I am with being able to take an actor and coach them through a scene, and somebody who's more skilled with helping a person with their public speaking skills. But what I do have is ability to use the skills and experience that I have learned with acting, with ESL, and of course my entrepreneurial ventures to help empower a person with these skills to help them perform better, whether it is public speaking or whether it is acting or whether it is a mixture of the two. right? So I'm pretty much open for whomever is interested to go through that journey with me.
Zach, you certainly have the ability to get people to do things totally out of their comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
I recall myself walking around a swimming pool, howling like a dog. I would have never, ever done that.
Mm-hmm.
I think through your coaching and through your through you guiding me to explore that part of me, that very uncomfortable space where I would normally not have done something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Helped me open up something where I could express myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it has certainly made a difference in how I approach an audience when I do public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I must say that you certainly challenge your students.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I'm very happy that I'm challenging you.
Absolutely.
The course helps you with exploring your personal boundaries in a way where you get to know who you are, and also to overcome limitations in yourself, especially regarding social anxieties, being shy, not being confident. This was an acting thing. This was for theater. But, you know, you got somebody coming in saying, dude, I just struggle with, I'm a bit socially anxious. I got to do this presentation in front of the corporate board or whatever. You know that can be overcome, and this is the place where it is overcome. Because I came in wondering about the camera, but now I was just being, and I didn't worry about the camera, and that's so much more authentic.
Coaching session was great. As you can see, I've got a big smile on my face for starters. I think today we touched a lot on the feel of things, right? Because if it's something that you can feel, then it's a form of expression that you can convey. I like the little Jimmy concept, or the concept of the recording device is a persona, is the audience, and treating it as such. If I'm speaking as if I'm speaking to someone I'm more familiar with, then I'm a lot more open and engaging, and I'm easier to engage with as well. I would very specifically encourage business owners, if you struggle to communicate the task at hand or the task that needs to be fulfilled as a business owner, this is definitely the type of coaching that you would require to assist you to communicate clearly and concisely, but also to have the right expression to match that communication.
It's a huge mind change. It is a shift that you've got to make from talking to a client and then talking to a group. I've been doing this for 28 years. I know what I'm talking about, so it should be easy to talk about it. I think the biggest challenge for me was you've got to speak from your heart. You know me, I don't breathe. I want to speak my speech in 5 minutes, and I want to hold my breath for 5 minutes. And I think that is a very underrated skill. Most medical people can benefit from this, because we are going to be talking at conventions or meetings or bigger groups, and if you want to make people sit up, listen up, and if you want people to have that click moment, to have that communicating a message and just saying the words is two different things. That was my click moment for the day. You see, you're never too old to learn.
Yeah, so what has happened is that I've transitioned over to what you call actor-based performance coaching. So that's at this stage where I am right now. That's the thing that we're talking about, coaching and teaching, and whether or not some people will take me seriously, or some who will take me seriously, you know. I think people who want to have the ability to perform better, but would wish to do so from the perspective of an actor. And that's why I call myself a performance coach, an actor-based performance coach. And those are the type of people that I help. People who are actors, people who are entrepreneurs, people who are doctors, business CEOs. Those are the type of people that I help perform better in front of an audience or in front of camera. Whether it's a film camera on a film set or their iPhone. That is what I do, and that is where I've transitioned over to. So all the way from 2006, from starting this, 2003, we saw 2006, but all the way starting from 2003 of wanting to be an actor to studying to become an actor from my teenage years up until now where I have all of this. This is what I do. So I hope this gave you a good trajectory as to what that journey looks like to transition from somebody who wants to be an actor, an amateur, to a person who is an actor, to a person who does teaching from an actor's perspective, to somebody who uses all those accumulated skills to create new stuff, to where we are right now, actor-based performance coaching. Yeah,
I agree. I think also just helping you to express yourself better, becoming more animated, body language, breathing. So many things that we don't consider, especially in business when we speak to our teams, when you chair meetings. These things are very, very important. And I must say that I have certainly benefited from the training. I absolutely have. And I benefit from it daily still. Yeah.
That's great. Well, folks, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for joining. Folks, if you want to learn more about actor-based performance coaching, then you guys can click the link to my Telegram channel. There I'll be posting updates as to when I'll be doing these trainings. I would like to create an event for people who want to perform better. A mixture, a room for actors and for presenters and teachers and for entrepreneurs and CEOs, a space or a rehearsal room where you can get together and do that. That's something that I really want to try and build right now for the next month, to start testing out. And I invite you guys, actually, if you want to join my rehearsal room session where you get to practice performing in front of an audience of your peers in a safe environment, in a safe space, join my Telegram channel. I'll be giving some updates over there. If you're interested in following me, then you guys can click the like and share button. If there's somebody who will like watching this, who you'd like to share this with, somebody who wants to see what a journey of being a professional actor can look like and how we can transition from an amateur to an actor to a teacher to a content creator to a coach of some sort, you can share this video with them. So, Terence, thank you so much. It was really nice having you here today.
Thank you, Zach.
And folks, I've been Zach. You have been awesome. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye, guys.